Buddy, it is the one and only commie preacher. Hang on, I'm going to get my headphones on. Sorry, this is a very spur of the moment. All right, that's the limitation to doing this on my smartphone. Is that an incoming phone call will interrupt my stream? I hope that wasn't too bad. Hi, it is Charlie Arp, your commie preacher, the Reverend Comrade of the Church of the Revolution. So glad you're watching this video. It really, like I said, literally was spur of the moment. I have a new job, and that new job means I work in the evenings from around 4 to around 8 p.m. So I get home till 9, sometimes 10 if the Chicago Transit Authority is running behind schedule, which they often are at that hour of the night. And of course, COVID has severely impacted their staff levels, so they're always complaining about not having not enough operators and so on. So I sometimes don't get home till 8, 9, 10. So I don't sleep very well these days. I don't know how you're doing with the pandemic. I know a lot of people have sleep problems, especially people who work at home because we don't get out, we don't get to see enough sun. But in the past couple of weeks with the new job, I'm out, I go out in the middle of the afternoon to get to my job by 4 o'clock and then come home, like I said, after 9 o'clock usually, and sometimes even later. So because of that, my sleep is kind of screwed up. I try to get my 8 hours. I mean, my psychiatrist is like very insistent. You've got to get your 8 hours of sleep because it affects all the other systems in your body if you're not getting enough sleep. So last night went to bed about 3, had to get up at 8:30 to take my wife to work. So I got about 5+ ish hours of sleep, and I said I'm gonna go back to sleep. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back to sleep. I had to get up and make a live video for the Church of the Revolution channel here on YouTube. Now, why am I doing this? When the inspiration strikes, I feel like I have to take it seriously. And I was there trying to go to sleep. I turned on my little sleepy music that I like to play to put myself back to sleep because I have a meeting at 11:30, and I need to be rested for that meeting, but I just could not. There was just words flowing through my head. A sermon, 2 sermons. I literally got 2 sermons in one while I was trying to fall asleep. I'm a Pentecostal. I'm also a Quaker. That makes it when the Spirit says do, you gotta do, right? As the old Negro spiritual says. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, I call this Revolution Theology. So one of the new things that I'm going to be doing here on the Church of the Revolution YouTube channel is I am going to be doing series, thematic series. So I've got Revolution Theology, which is going to be this one. This is going to be a sermon. I might even pull out my Bible and talk about the Bible. I mean, I'm going to talk about the Bible, but I don't know if I'm going to actually hold up the Bible and read from it. I might. I got it here if I need to. But I'm probably just going to go with the Bible that's in my head. So this Revolution Theology series is going to be what it sounds like. It's going to be Theology of the Revolution, what that's about. I'm also going to start a Revolution Culture series. I'm going to talk about, I'm a big Star Trek nerd. If you follow me on Facebook, you probably know I am a huge Star Trek nerd. And I'm going to talk about Star Trek and politics. I'm going to talk about music and politics. I'm going to talk about, movies, TV. Hell, I'll talk about the latest live theater, which I haven't done in a while. I may go to a comedy show. There's a comedian in Chicago that I'm really kind of hot about right now. Her name is Chrissy Chapleka. Did I say that right? Chapleka. Chrissy Chapleka. She is a queer, hyper femme comedian who just is hilarious. You can find Chrissy Chapleka on TikTok. That's ChrissysChlapeka. Chrissy Chapleka. I have trouble saying that name because it's, it's probably Polish or something. By the way, did you hear that Poland and Mexico in the World Cup? Chicago's going to be going nuts. Half of the, cheering for Mexico, half cheering for Poland. Anyway, back to Revolution Theology. Why am I here? Why am I preaching? What is this spirit message that has just been pumping in my brain and not letting me fall back to sleep. Very simple. It is a theopolitics of evil. A theopolitics of evil. So I participate in a lot of Facebook groups, and oddly enough, or not, a lot of my inspiration comes from the conversations I have in these Facebook groups. And I am a member of a Facebook group called Non-Theist Friends or Quakers. We are non-theist Quakers. In that group, we don't accept the traditional definition of God. Some would call themselves atheists. Some would call themselves humanists. Some would call themselves, as I do, pantheist. And as a pantheist, I believe the physical cosmos is God. Now, wait a minute. You say, but God can't be the physical cosmos. God is this invisible, omnipotent, omniscient being who created the cosmos and who intervenes in human lives with miracles and judgment and punishment, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's break that down. Again, we're doing theopolitics. We're doing a theopolitics of evil, but let's start with the theopolitics of the cosmos and the theopolitics of God. So there are two competing worldviews, and actually there's a third one that tries to have it both ways. We'll talk about that. There are two competing worldviews according to Karl Marx, who is the greatest theologian of the 1800s, 19th century. Karl Marx. Now you say, well, wait a minute, Karl Marx isn't a theologian. I beg to differ. Karl Marx is one of the greatest theologians, the greatest theologian of the 19th century. Why would I say that? Look at his history. His grandfather was devoutly Jewish. His ancestors many of them were devoutly Jewish. His father, Karl Marx's father, converted to Christianity, the state religion of the part of the German territories that they were living in. I don't think the state of Germany existed, but there were a lot of German little countries. There were Prussia and Austria and so on. And wherever Marx is from, and I think it may have actually been Prussia, but I'm not sure, his father converted to the state religion. And Karl Marx was raised in the state religion. And as a teenage young man, he wrote a poem about union with Christ and his faith and how important it was to him. Now, he eventually becomes known as the most notorious atheist who said religion is the opium of the masses. So how did he get from union with Christ to the opium of the masses? I'm not going to explain that all right now. But my point is, because why this touches on what I'm saying about the cosmos being God, the pantheistic view. And I said there's two worldviews, and according to Marx, those two views are idealism and materialism. Now, in modern terms, what I would say is idealism and physicalism. There are two competing worldviews in the Western world and perhaps around the world, perhaps throughout history. What is idealism? Idealism says, and you can find this in many religious forms and philosophical forms, idealism says this world isn't real. What is real, the physical world, isn't real. What is real is consciousness. What is real is the stuff that is the experience you have of the world. It's real, but it's not of real things. It's only all in the ideal realm. Okay. Christianity has idealism in it, at least some official forms of Christianity. They say the goal of this life and of religion is to prepare you for the next life, which will be ideal, which will be spiritual, not physical. I think that's crap. But now the other worldview is physicalist or materialist. The other worldview says your body is real. This place that we live in is real. Other people are real. Animals, plants, stones, volcanoes, earthquakes, all that is real. That is real. And the ideal is just the thoughts in your head that is reacting to this world. And to say it's not real is to engage in violence, to engage in oppression, to say we're going to subordinate those who are merely physical to those of us who are intellectual, who are conscious. So the subordination of consciousness to physicality, to saying that the subordination of the physical to the conscious is oppression, is judgment. And so I elevate the physical and say it is God. The cosmos, the physical cosmos is God. The physical cosmos is the source of good. The physical cosmos is our creator, is our creator, is the generous and abundant source of our lives. And in the ancient times, in prehistoric times, human beings lived communally. We call this in Marxism primitive communism. And we were living as we were in harmony with nature. We had small little clans and tribes, and we lived off the land, and it was scarce, but it was human and it was genuine, and it was not marked by great warfare, by great violence. It was primitive communism. In the story of the Garden of Eden, in the Bible, is in a certain sense a symbolic narrative of primitive communism, because it says they didn't have to work. They just ate the fruit of the garden. There was one tree that God said, don't eat that tree, and we'll get to that tree because we're going to talk about evil. But in the original creation narrative, Adam and Eve were living in harmony with nature. They didn't need to work. They didn't need to do anything. They could make love, right in the middle of the grass, and it was all beautiful and wonderful. And then in comes this snake, right? This snake, who was the most subtle of creatures. And the snake comes in and he says, is it true that the Creator says you can't eat of any of the trees? It says, no, the Creator said there's only one tree that we cannot eat of, and it is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because if we eat that tree, and this is Eve talking to the snake, Adam was right there overhearing this conversation. You'll see that. It actually says Adam was with her in the Eden story. Adam was listening to Eve talking to the snake, and the snake is saying, well, you won't die. You'll become like gods. So Eve looked at this fruit and says, wow, it's really beautiful. I want to eat that. It's luscious. It's scrumptious. And she eats it and gives some to Adam. It says that. It's all in there. Adam wasn't a passive, well, maybe a little passive, but Adam wasn't ignorant of what happened. He heard the snake. He was talking to Eve. Now, again, this is a story. This is a symbolic story. It's not literally true. And then when they eat that, their sight, their consciousness changed. They realized they were naked. They experienced shame in their bodies. And what did they do? They covered them up with leaves and they hid from God, because God walked in the garden. They say that God has no legs, but he walked in the garden in the story, in the Eden story, which tells you it's a story. Don't take it literally. Understand it symbolically. That's the point of the Eden story. And so it was shame about the body. And what have I just said? The idea that the physical world is evil is idealism and is in fact itself evil. To believe that the physical world is evil is evil. Now, what does this have to do with politics? What does this have to do with theology and religion and revolution? I'm getting to that. So if you read out the stories in Genesis, the next story we're going to talk about is the Tower of Babel. And what happens at the Tower of Babel is that because everybody's speaking the same language, some people said, well, we want to build a tower so that we can reach up to heaven. Now, again, this is a symbolic story. Don't read it literally. They're not literally trying to get to the stars or the moon by building this tower. Some people have speculated that it was an ancient observatory. They were trying to chart the world by using this tower to chart the stars and know the times and seasons. But that's not really the point of the story. The point of the story is there was an attempt for some humans to become like gods. And remember, in the Garden of Eden story, becoming like a god was evil. It led to evil. It led to a curse upon the earth, so that humans had to work for a living, that women gave birth in pain. Now, again, none of that's literal. It's symbolic. It's about the physical world becoming oppressed, becoming cursed, becoming evil. But that evil is actually the good. The physical world is divine. It is this consciousness that the world is shameful and dirty and physical, and therefore should be controlled and dominated and even cursed, that is evil. The curse itself is evil. It emerges because people want to be like God. They want to escape their physical bodies and become like the angels in heaven with no worries and can control everything. Now, why am I thinking about this? Why am I talking about this? Because somebody in this group that I'm in, one of these groups that I'm in, said, well, if Putin and Zelensky or NATO are all evil, can we talk about people being divine? And that's a very good question. And I can't give you the ultimate answer. I can give you an answer that is what I will call relatively accurate, close to the truth, not 100% the truth. In Marxism, we identify the capitalist class as the most evil class of human beings ever to be on planet Earth. Through the capitalist class, the European civilization began to be spread around the world, and the capitalist relations of economy began to be spread around the world. It went to North America, it went to Africa, it went to Asia, and it just dominates the entire world. Capitalism puts every human being in subjection to the principle and law of profit. Sounds a lot like the ideal ruling the physical, the ideal oppressing the physical. That is at the heart of capitalism. Capitalism is plutocracy, oligarchy. It's also a patriarchy because the people running capitalism are almost exclusively men. Yeah, they let a few millionaires like Oprah Winfrey, but Oprah Winfrey doesn't really have a lot of power in capitalism. That power belongs to the capitalist class as a whole. And the capitalist class is in league with the political class, the oligarchy. In fact, capitalism is a kind of oligarchy. So you have the political class, the capitalist class, subordinating the masses, which are the physical laborers. So again, the subordination of physical labor to conscious class domination is idealism. It is idealism that oppresses the masses, oppresses the proletariat, oppresses the working, oppresses the African people, oppresses Asian people, oppresses indigenous people. This oppression emerges out of capitalism as an idealistic bourgeois economy and oligarchy as an idealistic bourgeois ruling class. So where does this evil come from? As I say, it comes from a tiny minority of human beings becoming powerful and having the ability to dominate the masses. And this comes again, we can go back to the biblical story, right? So Abraham leaves because he's been given a vision of a promised land where he can live in peace and prosperity, a land flowing with milk and honey, because he's been living in poverty in the city-state of Ur of the Chaldees, and he doesn't like it there. So he leaves with his wife and his clan, and they go off into the wilderness, essentially to look for a better life. And eventually they find a better life, and he has his children, and there's all kinds of stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then Jacob gives birth to 12 sons and then a 13th son named Joseph. Joseph then ends up, because he's so favored being the youngest, he is favored by his father. His brothers hate him. They sell him into slavery. He ends up in Egypt. So in Egypt, there is a person we call the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh has a court, and he has his courtiers, and he has his ruling class that dominates Egypt. And the Jewish people, during a time of famine, end up in Egypt, in the land of Goshen. And because of Joseph, they're treated fairly well at first. But then a new king arose who, according to the book of Exodus, did not know Joseph. And he began to enslave the people in Goshen. He enslaved the Hebrews, the Israelites, and forced them to build his buildings and to make bricks without straw and so on. There's all kinds of harsh enslavement tactics described in the book of Exodus. And then God says, well, I'm going to end this. And so he takes Moses, who was raised by the Pharaoh's daughter, because at one point the the Pharaoh is slaughtering all the Jewish baby boys because there's so many of them, and he could sense a revolution is coming from those baby boys. So he slaughters all of them. Moses gets rescued, raised by the Pharaoh, begins to rebel against the Pharaoh, gets expelled from Egypt, goes off to the land of Midian where he encounters Jethro and marries one of Jethro's daughters. And then he has an encounter with a fiery bush that did not get consumed by the flames. This again, interpret it symbolically, not literally. This is the consciousness of justice, the consciousness of righteousness. And he said, my people are oppressed in Egypt, and it's your job to go back and liberate them from it. And that's where we get the story of the Exodus. We get the 10 plagues. We get the killing of the firstborn of Egyptians and so on. It's a brutal, horrible story. But you got to remember the beginning point is that the Jewish people who had sought a promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, were oppressed by the Egyptian ruling class and became enslaved. And they are liberated from slavery through the actions of Moses. So again, this story of ideal consciousness ruling over physical bodies and enslaving and oppressing them is biblical. So you say, but you can't be, God is a spirit. Everywhere in the Bible, God walks in the Garden of Eden. He has an arm. He has a voice. He has a body. God has a body in the biblical text. And that body is the cosmos. God is the cosmos. And evil is this attempt to subordinate the physical to the ideal, to the consciousness, to the intellectual classes, to those who have knowledge and power, subordinating the physical, subordinating the masses, oppressing and exploiting the masses. That is revolution theology, because our job as revolutionaries is to unite the masses in a revolutionary overthrow of the death systems of the ruling class. That's the sermon. It came to me today, again, as I was trying to go back to sleep because I didn't get enough sleep last night. I hope you enjoy that sermon. I hope you subscribe to the Church of the Revolution channel. I'm going to end this video now, but I really had fun making it. All right, how do I end this? I've not done one of these before. We're going to end it. Yes.